Hi, I'm André Gagné. I want to welcome you to my YouTube channel. What I'd like to do this week is something a little different. I'm not starting a new series. I might do this in a couple of weeks. This week I want to come back on a retweet that I did of a tweet on Twitter that I had posted last summer. You can see it now on your screen. I'm going to read it and explain my reasoning behind my affirmation here. This might sound controversial, but at this point I have to say that the Christian right in the US is a menace not only to American democracy, but also to global stability. And I would venture to say even probably more so than jihadism. Now, of course, this can be a controversial statement, especially in light of the various terror attacks that we've seen in the past couple of years, and I've covered a lot of that in my own work. I've worked a lot on issues pertaining to radicalization, jihadism, terrorism in the last few years, and now I have to say that where we are 2 years into the Trump administration, I have to admit that we are at a time where the Christian right is probably more of a menace at this moment for democracy and global stability than jihadism itself. It doesn't mean that jihadism is not violent and it won't strike or there won't be any more terror attacks. But I have to say that the Christian right, with what it's accomplishing now in the US, is a great threat. How is that so? I'll try to kind of deconstruct this and provide some comments with respect to this statement that I've made, just to explain my reasoning. There are 3 things that I'd like to look at. The first one is the idea that now we are in the 2nd year of the Trump administration, and that the Christian right is essentially responsible for Trump being in the White House. And this has been, of course, covered abundantly in the media, and this is a realization now that 81% of white evangelicals have voted for Trump. And one of the reasons, of course, is what he represents. Of course, he meets certain needs, and evangelicals and people on the Christian right, we would say, have felt under the Obama administration let down. They felt that their voice wasn't heard. Now with Trump, they seem to have regained their voice and their influence in US politics. And this is why essentially they voted for him. They voted for him because they saw him as a strong man for Judeo-Christian values and its tradition. They, for some of them, even consider Trump to be a modern-day Cyrus, a modern-day Messiah, comparable to the great Persian king Cyrus, where we have information about the king briefly in the biblical text of the prophet Isaiah. I did an entire video on the question of the Cyrus-Trump fallacy. You can check it out on my YouTube channel. And I just showed how it made no sense to actually compare Cyrus to Donald Trump today. Now, that's the first thing, the fact that we have this individual in the White House, and that he has the ability, in fact, he's the leader of the most powerful nation in the world, right? So that in and of itself tells you a lot about the power and the influence that the Christian right was able to have on American politics. Now, this has repercussions, and the second element that I want to address, it has repercussions on domestic policies. This, we see it constantly. There's not one day in the news where we don't see the enactment of and the kind of mobilization of Christians in their fight against secularism. So there is a push for some kind of Christian nationalism. We see it through initiatives like Project Blitz. I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but in the past 2 years, there's been like 70 different bills that were passed in some 20 states that promote ideas of religious liberty, ideas of religious education, even things like even promoting the possibility of having a Christian Heritage Week, things like that. So the issue around specifically the notion of religious liberty, we might at first be very much pro that, but when you look at the agenda, something that Fred Clarkson has dubbed a Christian supremacist agenda, essentially you see that that religious liberty is essentially Christian liberty. It's not liberty for all Christian, not Christian traditions, but all religious traditions. It's essentially liberty for Christians to even discriminate against things that they don't agree, that don't fit their worldview. If some actions or some decisions do not correspond to their biblical worldview, they can resist that. And that's their right, because it's all about religious liberty, you see? So it's not religious liberty for Muslims or LGBTQ or even atheists or agnostics, it's religious liberty for Christians. So that's a problem in and of itself, okay? So they're engaged in a stealth manner, and this is not seen because you see, Trump is he's a distraction. Everything that's going on is the tweets, the controversies, all of this is a distraction while Christian groups try to push their agendas in a stealth manner, and people one day just wake up and they're stuck with these laws that discriminate against a lot of individuals that are not necessarily Christian or don't embrace at least the Christian worldview, how it's understood by more fundamentalist brands of believers. Now, that's one thing with respect to domestic policies, but there's also everything related to immigration. And we've heard a lot about the Muslim ban, how that discriminated against Muslims that are already in the US, but also Muslims from other countries. It has, of course, labeled certain countries as being problematic in terms of terrorism, and disculpated other countries that were not associated, or at least in the minds of the Trump administration, was not associated to terrorism. But there were countries that were associated with terrorism that were not on that list, as you know. So the Muslim ban was one thing, but then there's also, as you know, the issues around immigration, stronger immigration policies, the border wall, separation of families at the border, of the Mexican and American border, and how the Bible sometimes is even used by politicians to legitimize these types of policies that are demeaning and they are degrading, and they are very, very far from any kind of policies that would embrace human dignity and decency. So you see, this is again rooted in the ideas of the Christian right. If you just take a few minutes and read a lot of the literature that has been produced by people like Paul Weyrich and William Lynn, for example, you'll see that they promote this idea of America first. They promote this idea of securing the borders, and having stricter immigration laws. And it's all because of the preservation of Judeo-Christian values, and all the preservation of what they consider to be the main tradition and the major white culture. So that's what you see. You see, when it comes to how it can impact democracy, you see that these types of policies at the domestic level have a profound impact on Americans, on Americans themselves. So the first two things are really significant when it comes to the responsibility that the Christian right has in contributing problems with respect to democracy and instability. So the rise of Trump in the White House and the mystic policies in the US. But the third thing is also significant, and that plays globally, is the international relations of the US with many countries and how that creates a lot of global instability. We know that the Trump administration has favored Israel, and we've seen it through the move of the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. We've seen this. This has caused a lot of problems. It causes problems when we think about a plan for a two-state solution. The issue that Jerusalem would be declared as being the state, the capital of the modern state of Israel by the U.S. causes a lot of problems for Palestinians, because Jerusalem has never been considered as such by any U.S. president before Trump. So that creates a lot of instability, creates a lot of problems. And this instability in the Middle East, of course, is seen with what Trump is doing with the Iranian nuclear deal, what the Obama administration had accomplished. It had gotten significant gains and progress with respect to that, but because Israel sees Iran as a menace, of course, the Trump administration is just going to put the axe in that deal and cause more instability, you see. So, this is rooted in the Christian right's ideology, their opposition to Islam, for example, and how they see Islam or any sort of manifestation of Islam and its progress in the world as a menace to Judeo-Christian values and the Judeo-Christian culture. So you see this instability in the Middle East. We see instability with respect to Russia, how the Trump administration caters to Russia and its president. And one of the reasons for that, of course, is that Putin is often considered by many Christian right advocates as a strong man, as someone who is there to defend the Judeo-Christian values against Islam, against the rise of Islam, and against LGBTQ rights. Putin is the one that pushes back against that. And they would like their own president, Trump, to emulate, to be a strong man like Putin is a strong man. So you see, there's issues there too, in relation to the rapport that the US government and its administration has with Russia. We've seen the problems that this has caused at the National Prayer Breakfast, where you had some people establish connections with Russian spies through lobbying efforts that were made at the National Prayer Breakfast, this event that is held every year in February. And we know that the people that are at the organizational level of this event, those that are responsible for this event, is a religious political group that works in a stealth manner, with respect to making connections with all sorts of individuals across the world, even dictators. This group called the Family. I'm not going to go into a lot of details. You know probably much about that already. It's been in the news. If you don't, do read Jeff Charlotte's book entitled The Family, and he, of course, deconstructs and shows the rapport that some of these people from the Christian right are establishing with, of course, individuals in Russia, but other dictatorships across the world, and they have been doing so for many, many years. And of course, it's because of their idea of what constitutes the kingdom of heaven, how the kingdom of God should be advanced in any possible manner, and if it means to establish relations with dictators, they will do so for the sake of the kingdom. So it is this idea that Jesus was there as a strong man. He was there to promote the kingdom, and the kingdom has to advance in even an imperialistic way, if necessary. And it doesn't have to be with arms necessarily, but it could be done in a subtle manner, in a stealth manner, where they influence policies across the world. So the family is at the heart of that, you see, and that's Christian right. And that creates a lot of instability in the world. It creates a lot of instability in America itself. Even things like tariffs. The Trump administration has recently laid out all a series of tariffs against various countries like China and even Canada. Can you imagine? Canada, my country, has always been an ally of the US, and we've been treated so badly. I don't want to whine, but it's almost unimaginable that there would be conflict between the US and Canada, but Trump managed to instill conflict between our two countries. And what that does, even the issue of tariffs, it's all about isolationism, protectionism, America first. This is clearly laid out in the manifestos published by architects of the Christian right, like Paul Weyrich and William Lind. It's very, very clear. Just read their book, The Next Conservatism. They talk about tariffs. They talk about the importance of imposing tariffs and making sure that America is first, economically speaking, and that and that people in America are concerned with what's going on economically and socially with their own country. And it's all about this Make America Great. So this is not necessarily something that Trump invented. This was the basis of Pat Buchanan's own political platform in the 80s, Making America First, Making America Great. So if you have time, just read The Next Conservatism. You're going to read essentially what Trump is doing for the most part. And interesting fact, as you know, I've tweeted about this, and Bruce Wilson has talked about this, and James Scaminacci has talked about this. Lind has given a copy of his book to Trump prior to the elections of 2016. Early 2016, Lind met with Trump, and he gave him a copy of The Next Conservatism. And what's fascinating is Trump responded by saying that he saw people in his own organization with the book. So people are familiar with this plan. This comes from people that are architects of the Christian right, you see? And now what they've proposed in those writings is coming to fruition. It's appearing now. We see it in policies, domestic and international policies. This is why the Christian right is more of a menace, because when you think about it, it's not just the fact that Trump came on the scene because of them and because they have influence over domestic and international policies. It's because they are now influential and have a voice, an important voice in the midst of the most powerful nation in the world. So they have much more access to money, power, influence than any jihadist group could have. So in that sense, they are a greater threat. In that sense, the policies that are, instilling themselves in America and turning a lot of Americans towards embracing a plausible theocratic way of life eventually will spill over into the rest of the world. It will spill over into, and it is doing so, into international relations. And that has a profound impact, much more profound impact than terror attacks, which are terrible. Terrible for victims, terrible for populations, of course. But the resources that the Christian right has compared to jihadists is incomparable. And this is why we need to be aware of what's going on. And this is why I still stand and I still agree with the tweet that I've posted, that the Christian right in the US is a menace to democracy, not only American democracy, but global stability, more so possibly than jihadism. So thank you once again for tuning in to this video and for subscribing. Please do. So subscribe if you enjoy these short clips. You can like and share them. And of course, I will see you next week for another short clip on the impact of religion in our modern world and how we should be aware of what's going on in the world and possibly offer solutions to some of these issues that affect us all. So thank you, have a great week, and see you soon.